And when I saw that, I wanted to do that. Welcome to 10-Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Shane Patrick.
With me, as always, is Phil Freeman. Today, we're going to be talking with Phil about the inception of MotoQuest.
Let's get right to it, shall we?
Today, we are going to talk about the beginning of your other career. I ride motorcycles. A lot of our listeners ride motorcycles. You ride motorcycles. And you found a way to make a living with motorcycles. How long have you been riding bikes? And yeah, take it away, Phil. When did you start wanting to do this for a career?
I would say that I never even thought it was possible to make a living out of motorcycle riding or motorcycle tours or anything like that. That was never on my radar, but travel was. And I would say that I really just got started traveling. My mom was a stewardess. My dad always glorified travel and talked about it all through my childhood. And they both encouraged me to go and see the world. And I feel really fortunate because of that, because that was really the foundation of, adventure for me to go out and experience something. And I guess it really kicked off when my dad was part of Rotary, the Rotary Club, and he came home one night with an application for a Rotary Exchange Student program. And I had no idea what it was. I thought immediately I wouldn't do it, much like many things that were really good in my life. All through my life, I immediately said no to it.
Especially if your parent or some other superior suggests it, right?
Yeah. And then I ended up filling it out. And then I got called in for an interview. And the next thing you knew, I headed to Brazil as a Rotary Exchange Student at the age of 16. And I spent 10 months there, and I lived with 2 host families, and I traveled extensively through Brazil, and I learned how to speak Portuguese. And I came back to the American high school system, and I wasn't the same person after that. All I really wanted to do was travel again. And when I got into university, I applied for a program to go abroad, and I ended up in Ecuador. And I minored in Spanish as well as international relations, and that really fit into my program. And I ended up in Quito, Ecuador for 10 months. And I did a homestay, and I also did a semester with just embedded in regular classes doing 10-page reports in Spanish. And I traveled extensively through Ecuador and really loved it. And that didn't seem to kill my lust for languages. And I ended up, after university was over, I went back. I applied for a job I'd heard about from a friend of mine called the JET program. It's Japan Exchange Teaching Program. And what you needed was a bachelor's degree and no police record. And I could do both of those. So
good job.
I signed up, and they sent me to the North Island of Hokkaido for a year, and I extended it up to 2 years. And I spent, outside of 2 years, maybe 8 or 10 days outside of Japan. And I had a wonderful experience. I lived in a really small town. I gave classes to very small rural schools. I became kind of part of the community, and I loved it. And that is where I started riding motorcycles. And I don't think of myself as a motorcyclist. I'm more of a traveler. And I can't go in depth about what's going on inside the inner workings of an engine, but I sure can tell you on a map where I want to go.
Right.
And having grown up a skier, and I love to river raft and just bicycle, motorcycling was the best conveyance that I'd ever experienced, and the freedom of it. So I ended up buying a used motorcycle from a fellow teacher in Hokkaido and camping and traveling all over that island. The island's about 1/5 the size of California and about the latitude of Oregon. And on my first 1-week trip, I realized that this is what I want to do. And if I could figure out a way to make it pay, I'm going to do this.
So can I jump in and ask you, I mean, there's motorcycles in Alaska, in lower 48, Ecuador. Why did it take so long for you to get on them? Is there a Japanese motorcycle culture that's more ingrained or?
That's a good question. And absolutely. In Japan, the percentage of riders is much higher than in the United States. And instead of being a car culture, Japan is a motorcycle culture. And most of the large manufacturers come from there. And the roads are made for motorcycling. And in order to get your license over there, you have to invest money and time to the tune of $1,500 in a week-long class, which makes better motorcycle riders. And what blew me away when I was in Hokkaido was watching hundreds of motorcyclists pass me every day on this lonely country road. And I thought, why are they on this lonely country road in the middle of nowhere? And why are there so many? And all of them had, backpacks or tents strapped to the back of their motorcycles. And they were going to the next campground. And they were from all over Japan. And it was a mass exodus of Japanese riders who went to Hokkaido. And Hokkaido is very much what you would think of as the Alaska of Japan. It's pretty wild compared to the other islands. And that was where all the motorcyclists went. And when I saw that, I wanted to do that. And before then, I'd been on a motorcycle before, but I'd never traveled with it, and I never thought that I ever would. But when I was in that environment where it was ubiquitous, and on my way commuting every day, I went along a reservoir, and there was a public campground where you could see dozens of motorcyclists with their tents set up, and then the next morning they're breaking them down and leaving and going somewhere else. And I got swept up in that whole current. I wanted
the romance of it all.
Man, I want to be a part of that. And so one of my teachers, said, well, I do have an extra motorcycle. You can't ride it legally unless you, quote unquote, buy it from me. And I said, great, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy that and I'll sell it back before I leave. And so we did the paperwork, and then I thought about getting a license. And I had an international license, and I'd watched The Great Escape, and I had a bar of soap and a little pallet of ink, and the international driver's license isn't too difficult to duplicate. And heck, I was on my way. And then I just started riding around the island, and that's when I thought, that's how I got into it. And my father doesn't ride, my uncles do. So it was kind of in the family, but it was the first week of travel where I was on day 4, and I was, taking gas out of my tank and putting it into a camp stove, and then cooking breakfast and looking at a map rolled out on a picnic table, surrounded by a bunch of other motorcyclists doing the same thing, spending $3 a night for a camp spot right on a lake in a national park.
Outrageous.
And today was the day we were going to go climb up a bunch of rope. It was a series of waterfalls to go up to a hot springs. And it was one of those magical days. And I was going to do that for the rest of the week. And I thought, what is better than this? And that's when I started looking into companies back in Alaska. Do they even rent motorcycles? Do people do this? How can I take my entrepreneurial urge and put it into works? And
so we're talking like 96, something like that?
I was in Japan 92 to 94.
Okay. So in 1995, Were there people renting bikes in Alaska?
You're right. I was there from 94 to 96. I should know my own life.
Well, after a while, it gets hard to differentiate year to year.
Yeah, it was about 95 where I started thinking up the idea of how do I get this started.
That was Phil Freeman telling us about the inception of MotoQuest. If you want to learn more about that or anything else we talk about at 10 Minute Travels, please check us out at 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.